I'm Sara Spagnuolo, the founder of Artemperature. My mission is to connect people through art, and this coronavirus lockdown gave me the idea to fight the loneliness that we are living using the digital resources available online for getting people together again, visiting museums and art galleries together and talk together. I wish you an interesting journey with us, and I send all my love to Italy, that is my own country, and stay at home. Bye.
Hello everyone, my name is Giabo Gomino. I'm a digital content creator, intercultural enthusiast, and of course, lover of the arts. I love all things arts and creativity because art is a continuous reflection of our societies. It has historical value, which is important in preserving our heritage. It's engaging, and it sort of makes us discover and want to know more about the world around us.
My name is Inherent Elliott. I'm a real estate photographer, and I also lecture in art history. I guess what really fascinates me about art is the story. Every great work of art has a story. How it was made, when it was made, why it was made, what influenced the artist to make this great work of art. So I guess what I'm looking forward to hear is hearing those stories from you about your favorite works of art. And I will share some of my favorites.
Hi, I'm Jenny Kachulius. I'm a musician originally from the US, now living and working in Zurich. I've been a lifetime lover of the arts in general and music and the visual arts in particular. However, it wasn't until I moved to Columbia, South Carolina for grad school and became close friends with a painter that I had a real personal relationship with the visual arts. So much so that I actually had my wedding in an art museum in my hometown of Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Hi to everyone. Thanks for being here. So today we are going to travel through space and time because we are going to visit an exhibition in Miami, but an exhibition in the past because it's an exhibition that has been done in 2018 in March, and is the exhibition of Lionel Smit, a South African artist. This is coming from an input from Kea. And so why did you choose this artist and this exhibition?
I think for me, number one, his art made me think about identity differently. It speaks of the history of South Africa, more importantly the Cape Malay people, but I think it can be extended to our individual sort of identities and how we define ourselves in this changing world. It is very important. I love his technique because just by looking at his art, you can see that these are multifaceted people and there's layers behind the person, and I think it's very intriguing that way.
Wow, I'm very curious, very curious. And the exhibition, the title of the exhibition is Obscura. Maybe we can try to figure out why they chose this title after.
I think we can discuss it more into depth when we go into the history of the Cape Malay people.
Okay.
A bit of context behind the artworks.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you would prefer that I start with a sort of...
No. Now
first.
Let's visit the exhibition. Here we are already inside the MOCA, so the Museum of Contemporary Art in Miami. Let's see. this artist is famous for very big sculptures and paintings. And then when I saw this sculpture, I really thought, oh wow, but this reminds me also a painting, because you see these kind of layers that are over this face. They remind like the brush strokes in a painting, and it's amazing. So let's see, let's go on.
So the quote is very interesting because it speaks about sort of the identities that he's trying to relate to us, that even as people, we are whole but unfinished. I mean, finished and whole and not whole at the same time. It's never a full, perfect image that we try to portray to the world, but internally with self and growth and experiences, there's sort of that fragmented self that comes across. Mm-hmm. And I loved seeing that in the works, because you can see that this is a whole person, yet there's pieces that are missing and pieces that are sort of creeping into the image. And I think it's an interesting quote.
Yeah, really. And I read that he was you were telling before, that he represented all the time women from this community in South Africa that is really multi-ethnic, and it's like really a melting pot of different cultures.
It is. So you find that the people come from Indonesia, Philippines, some from India. And because the port at that time was used as a trading post, they needed workers. They took prisoners who were in exile, political prisoners from those countries, and they would be found in sort of the Cape Port, working there, helping to build and sustain the port. Obviously, while they were there, they mixed with indigenous people of South Africa as well, which are the Khoisan, and the Guni people, which are the Black people. And it created a sort of hard to classify race. And I think later on we'll still speak about it, but this became a challenge for the government because they did not know how to classify them, especially in a colonial world where there's white and there's Black. The term colored came about because they did not know how to sort of classify this group of people. And even within the colored community, there's a variation there. So
that's interesting. Like the way it's described by his studio is that this exhibition is exploring how we're shaped and placed. And that's such an interesting thought about how much what we look like places us in society in various hierarchies, usually not being a good thing, but just an interesting thought to ponder while looking at any piece of art, but particularly this exhibition, about how much the look that we're giving off, or the look that we're perceived as giving off, really places us in society on different levels without necessarily any personal intention to be there, and in many cases without a lot of control over where you're placed.
Yeah, that's very true, and which is why the government had a big challenge trying to classify this group, because the sort of signifiers that they used did not apply to them. You know, if you have someone with curly hair and blue eyes with dark skin, how does the pencil test work, you know? Right. Or how does the blue eye, you know, sort of classification apply to them if you say that white equals blue eyes, or you know, you find someone who is dark with straight European-like hair.
Mhm.
So it was all these things that sort of, I think it brought about a bigger narrative. It speaks to the ridiculousness of race itself. And yeah, I think it's still relevant today. It's very much relevant.
Totally contemporary. Yeah. So yeah, let's go on and then we can talk again. Yeah. So this is, for what I understood, this is one of the most important sculptures from him. And the name is Morphos. And actually the explanation should be like the two women are one representing the past and the other one the future. And they are connected because it's a fluid story. It's the life.
Yeah, it's ongoing.
Yeah. And these sculptures was also exhibited in Union Square in New York in 2016. So this in Miami wasn't the first time for him in US. He was already in New York in 2016. Okay.
That was beautiful.
Oh, so yeah, I think it's quite powerful. So your first impression?
I think anyone else can go first.
Yeah.
Certainly, he opens a discussion at many different levels. It's not just a discussion of what is race, what is what defines us according to our different blood, whether we come from Indonesia or Java or indigenous South African or anything else. But looking at it from a kind of the traditional Western art perspective, what he does is open up on so many levels, because here he puts, and it's predominantly women that we saw in the video. There was one image of a man, and he's looking at all these different women, and he's not trying to beautify them. He's not trying to explain who they are. He's just portraying these faces. But it's fascinating that he talks about race and women, when traditionally those two topics were something that was so avoided. But I loved also the other thing I mentioned was the movement, the brush strokes, the way he goes up the patina on the bronze sculptures. You kind of, especially when combined with the music of the video, you kind of get this sense of aliveness, and you can just imagine that these women are kind of maybe in the middle of doing whatever they're doing or dancing, and they're whipping around. Yeah, they're static pieces, but yet they're dynamic. So yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it from my own personal
I have an idea about why are all the subjects are women. My feeling, but I didn't read anything about that. It's just my feeling, is that woman here is like a symbol. I don't think that he's really drawing and painting different real women. The feeling that I have is that woman here is represent life. Is more a symbol of a generation, life, and history that mix up everyone and creating. It's like I see woman like a metaphor of humanity. So everyone is the same, because you see all these faces that are more or less the same, but different color, different details. And so at the end, everyone is different. So together everyone is like, we are part of the same humanity, but we are unique for the colors that we have, the details, the little differences. This is just my interpretation. So yeah, so
as a non-visual artist, as a musician, I had not heard of Smit before a week ago. So I did a little bit of research just to have some kind of background. And I did a Google image search, of course, and saw a few pictures of his works, and then a picture of him. And I clicked on it to read a bio, and I was a little bit put off at first, which was not my ending impression after I looked at his works. But I was a little bit put off by some of the descriptive language used, not by Smit himself, but from other media sources. Very, very overtly masculine, kind of aggressive language. Like one thing said, exploding from the canvas, aggressively layered colors, smack in the face, etc., chaos on the canvas. And I was like, okay, this guy does a lot of portraits of women. That's interesting. And then I saw another one, a review that says, the sitter's face acts quite simply as a vessel for Smit's experimentation with color, stroke, and technique, but basically that he's using that as a blank canvas and putting himself into it. And I was just like, I'm not so sure I'm gonna like this exhibition. And then I actually looked at it like more in depthly, and I thought, I don't agree with those descriptions at all. This was not the impression I got. I did not feel like the essence of the individual that he was portraying was stripped away in any way at all. I do see the brushstrokes effect in the sculpture, which is quite fascinating, but none of that was this like aggressive, chaotic thing that I read in. This is
gracefully done. Oh, I was saying it was actually quite gracefully done.
Yes, that's the word, gracefully done. So I was surprised then, because of course I'm thinking, oh great, here's another white guy trying to usurp the power and identity of women of color. Great. And that's not what I took from the actual exhibition in any way.
Did you actually go back and see who wrote the reviews?
So I haven't looked in depthly into that yet, but what's interesting is also many of the people who Smit, or at least is described as the people that he's inspired by, are also white men. So it was not looking good until I actually looked into the exhibition itself, but it would be interesting to read, and you're probably right, many of those more aggressive, to use their word, descriptors are probably also men describing.
Oh, like this is one of the fascinating things about the art world. It is a predominantly white male environment.
Right.
It is changing, but probably too slowly.
Not quickly enough, yeah.
Yeah, to actually kind of keep up with what the artists themselves are producing. And so we still get this very patriarchal perspective.
And I think I was actually going to sort of touch on that if you look at the sort of the binaries that we use in everyday society on a more contemporary and global level, this sort of discussion on identity is important, because here we are defining ourselves on good versus evil, female versus male, and we adopt those characteristics based on what society tells us and constructs around us. And then here you have portraits of women who are both strong and soft at the same time. All of these sort of labels that we have can coexist with each other. It's never either or. It should be this and that. And I think his work sort of challenges that.
What is interesting, I think there was only one piece in the video where you saw anything lower than the bust. There was one torso.
Yeah.
All the others were literally to the shoulder or kind of neck. Therefore, kind of taking away any sense of sexuality. Yes, they are women, and we can see their gender just by their facial characteristics. But by kind of chopping off, essentially, we don't enter the discussion of sexuality. And that's what was beautiful about these pieces, was, especially as they were produced by a man, they weren't about a woman and her sexuality. It was, this is a woman. We are looking at her identity, her race, but we're not trying to make her sexy. And they're beautiful facial features of all these women, but it wasn't about even necessarily, this is a beautiful woman. These are the few features of the Cape Malay women, which engenders all of South Africa.
Yeah. So
I was going to say, when you were talking about cutting off at like the shoulders or the neck, it immediately popped into mind the many articles I've read about how pervasive it is in advertising for not just Hollywood, but films everywhere, that women are chopped off in various places, and it's not here, right? It's always like pieces of women's bodies are used in advertising, and it is not this portrait area that is usually depicted. Just the first thought that popped into my mind when you were saying that, here's a male artist even, but an artist who has cropped the woman's features in a way that is not sexualizing her, but featuring her.
Yeah, a woman is a mass of pieces. She's not a whole entity. She's made up of her individual parts that are then viewed objectively.
Yeah.
And each part is seen as creating some sort of effect. And that tradition, we can look back throughout all of art history.
But also another thing I was about to say, based on the binaries, it's a very Western way of organizing the world, right? And we can see a breakdown of those little ways of organizing the world where goes back to the binaries. And it's interesting to see how the global conversation is shaped around this, where sort of, I think the younger generation are sort of saying, I can't be defined by this, or I refuse to be defined by this. I want to be this and that. And the disruption that Sarah was looking for is actually what we see when it comes to gender, when it comes to just things that have been long existing, where it's a hierarchical way of organizing the world. And yeah, I think this work also sort of brings us to that bigger discussion. And another point that I wanted to make was second generation and third generation children. You know, there's, I think on 059, in the video that we see sort of these different faces on the wall, and on the floor, you've got sort of, I don't know, I would refer to them as masks. On the floor, held up, you know, useful when you speak about second and third generation, because you find people always negotiating their identities between either the roots of the places where their parents come from, or you have parents coming from two different places existing in a third sort of country environment. And culturally, yes, you do find differences. You know, you can exist anywhere in the world, but there's sort of things that you carry with you in your behavior, in the way you talk. And these kids are often found sort of negotiate.
The second and third generation and the binary discussion that you've kind of brought together, especially in this piece, you know, I think that's the most amazing thing about global art, is they bring global art, global artists, they bring a discussion to Western art that has never really been there. It is global art from everywhere else in the world, that has really kind of forced Western art to kind of rethink its focus. Because like that, it has always been predominantly male. It was only really in the 60s, 70s that women artists started to break out and be really recognized for the work that they were creating. You know, throughout all of art history, we've got female artists, and you know, one of the big tragedies in my mind about the Corona is there was going to be this amazing exhibition of a female 17th century Italian artist, Artemisia Gentileschi. It was closed. It was due to open in the States, and it closed because of the Corona. And female artists were always kind of like there, but then pushed aside. They were no longer important. And what we're now getting is, whether it's female artists or discussions about race and the history of colonialism, that is all coming from elsewhere in the world. The West has not wanted to talk about these things because they don't feel comfortable. And to see pieces like this, where there is a discussion of women, there's a discussion of different cultures and how those cultures all work together, it's wonderful. It's a beautiful piece. And you know, all these heads coming together, all facing in all sorts of different directions, looking in different different directions, but yet they're all together.
I want to show you, because we are now watching these heads with this layer of colors. So I found an interesting super short video process.
As though they're crying, you know, the way the painters being thrown at the faces and then starts to run down. There are certain of them. It almost has that look of crying, and then others, the way it kind of is dragged across, as though almost, in my mind, as though it's been whipped across. You know, kind of.
I was getting the feeling of exhaustion as well as you were zooming in, like between the facial sort of expression that we have and the paint sort of driving down. It's that feeling of exhaustion coming onto you and just tired. And it's not a physical, you know, tiredness. It's emotional, it's spiritual. It's sort of the weight of the world on your shoulders.
Yeah.
That was interesting.
Like the colors is like what surround us and touch us and change a little bit us every time. So I like it very much, this video, because it looks really that is not the colors that at the end we see are not coming from a real intention, but are just an addition from the cows.
Question. Oh, sorry, Jenny, you go ahead. Oh, I thought you were about to say something, Jenny. Question. Do we know much about the Cape Malay community themselves and kind of the sort of artworks that they're creating, and, you know, whether they're the color that they use? Because some of these colors, you know, it makes me think of when I lived in London, on Sunday morning, you'd always see the African women from all sorts of different countries, and they'd all be dressed up in these beautiful, beautiful dresses and headscarves with wonderful colors. And, you know, all these colors just make me think of those women going off to church or wherever they were going on Sunday morning. And kind of, what is the kind of artistic tradition within the Cape Malay community?
I think color is a very much integral part of this community. I will be sharing a link now with Sarah to go into. There's an area in Cape Town called MOCA, where you find a lot of the Cape Malay people, and their history is actually quite deeply entrenched in that area from when they first arrived. And just, it's colorful houses all around. And I think it's every second, the 2nd of January every year, they have a big festival. I can't say it's a Mardi Gras type, but then you get all these different groups of people dressed in colorful clothing, very flamboyant, very much out there. And it has historical significance. I can't say for sure.
But obviously bringing then all the different subcultures together.
The roads are closed, and it's a big fiesta, basically. And it's amazing to see. I just shared the link now with Sarah, maybe.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that I kind of understood was it was the community itself was traditionally a Muslim community.
It is. So
is it still very Muslim, or has it further diversified?
I think it's a bit of both. So I think later, following the 1600s, the arrival and so forth, there are people that still want to separate themselves from the Cape Malay community because they've identified that community as being Muslim. So them being not Muslim sort of sets them apart from the community. And for those that aren't sort of able to trace their roots all the way back, they found an identity as just being colored.
Yeah.
And it's a subgroup. Being colored would be, the subgroup of the whole colored community. So it's a colored community with Cape Malay coloreds, and then there's the Khoisan as well. So they all fall under the grouping of colored.
Wow.
So
there's colored essentially.
Exactly. Yeah. So within this group, there's just also the dynamics and sort of the politics that are cultural as well, and the need for people to sort of, move away from a certain group. There are those who also identify as African, some identify as Black, while others would say, no, I already have a heritage that's Cape Malay, or, without explicitly saying so, some also prefer that proximity to whiteness because it places them on a hierarchy higher than the Black community. So why would I identify as Black? And this is a flaw that we still have right now in the system, where you've got white, Indian, colored, and African. So
and African being lowest.
The redundancy of these labels again, because you can still be an African and be white. Mm-hmm. This is where we're at. So why is African just reserved for Blackness? So it's a continuous conversation. It's ongoing, and I'm by no means sort of the intellect go-to person for this, because it's my experience. It's purely based off observation, reading, and having, I'd say, small interactions with people from the community. But I think there's a far deeper discussion to be had and to be explored.
So maybe now we can listen the artists.
We had a meeting with MOCA Miami, and it was a great experience. Having meetings like this always opens up your mind to possibilities and things that you wouldn't have thought about before. So it's very exciting as an artist. It's sometimes a little bit daunting, but the idea of seeing a space and creating something for it I think is one of the best ways you could do it. I think the main idea behind the accumulation of disorder, that it almost represents us as a whole, as a society, as the idea of globalization, and each one is painted differently, and each one of these could represent different things, different people, different, kind of like a mass of everything that's out there. This exhibition is quite fragmented, as there are different pieces that I made in different times that came together, but there is a story or a bigger picture, and I think that speaks about identity. There's an oval base going at the bottom of this, and then around that I'm going to put paprika spice around it. Once again, that connection with the Cape Malay woman and the spice root. I feel very blessed that everything, worked out so well in the US. Having this show really means a lot to me, and it feels like it's giving me an opportunity for me to show the work together in one space, and inside a museum space is even more serious. I think artists struggle to find people that take them seriously, and I think this setup definitely does that.
Wow. So at the end, what do you think? Why the title? Why Obscura?
To me, it's self-evident. You know, the word obscura, on the one hand, it means darkness, and on the other, it means hidden. And those two words are put forward in so many different ways within the discussion of the exhibition. You know, one of the words that everybody kept repeating was the word layer.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how many times everybody used it, but it was that everybody said layer at some stage or another. And every time you take away a layer within the exhibition, within a piece, you discover something more, something that has been hidden, but it's revealed, hidden and revealed.
Yeah.
And the word darkness, yeah, you know, that is, I suppose, one of the key parts of this discussion of race. How can we define someone just on the darkness or the lightness of their skin?
On a really basic level, when he was talking about doing the exhibition in a museum, giving some sort of gravity or credit to what he's doing. And all I was thinking was, how many times do you go to a major museum and the only depictions you see of African or African descent men, and most particularly women, is in the exotic or other or ethnic or the African wing? It's not in a sort of like typical part or everything is spread out evenly. It's no, this is this little spot over here for this, and he is here. This person is putting these not very typical models in a very typical space, and a really open towards sort of evening the playing field of who's being represented in the main features of the museum.
Yeah, and I think also when it comes to like these sort of creative representation of saying this is African section or whatever, it sort of diminishes us to a single offering, and multiple offerings that come through a range of sort of issues that are put through the artworks or experiences and perspectives, and we need to move past that sectioning of art. Art is art, and it should be received, respected, loved, and appreciated as such.
For what it is, right?
Exactly.
And I think that again, once more goes back to this whole, the traditional Western interpretation of what is art. And that's why an exhibition like this, it works particularly well in a city such as Miami.
Right.
Because Miami has such a culturally diverse community. It isn't like some other North American cities or some Western European cities. It really sells itself on the fact that it has people from all over the world of all sorts of different races, genders, religions, you name it. But why should a city like Miami be able to kind of do that? It should be possible wherever. And we are moving towards that, but we're still so far away. That's the unfortunate thing.
But I think that's why a platform like this is important, Having this discussion is important, sort of looking at different artworks from around the world and sort of normalizing them is a big part of what we're doing. And I hope that, we're able to carry it through and sort of draw people in and yeah.
And that's the thing, you use the word normalizing, and where I live, there's a museum called the Giannata, and in Valle it's kind of the most important museum there is, and unfortunately all they ever show are impressionist artists or basically white European artists. And it's kind of like, let's push the boat, let's try different things, even if we feel uncomfortable and we don't understand. If we don't open our eyes, we don't see the beauty of the Cape Malay culture, if nothing else, and learn something new.
I think as a whole, the European society needs to sort of let go of the Eurocentrism, placing yourself at the center of things. Because once you let go of that layer of ego as well, you can more easily be receiving of something that's different and understand that actually you still have a role to play in a changing world,
One of the things that I think, why I feel that there's a difficulty in letting go of the Eurocentricity is people are afraid of then looking at their past and going, look what we did in those countries, look how wrong it was, look how we messed them up. And basically accepting and taking responsibility for what was done. And if we do that, oh my gosh, we could move forward.
We could definitely. People need to be comfortable in discomfort and understand actually that discomfort brings about a greater change.
Yeah.
Right.
About discussion. It brings about sort of a shared sense of responsibility.
Yeah.
Not on the same level, but kind of Ireland was basically a colony of England, and they look, there's going to be massive difficulties again because no one has ever taken responsibility. And if you put it at that level and then expand it to all those other colonies all over the world and bring it back. But it's a great work. It's a great exhibition, and
time is.
I love it.
Yeah, before we get into another 40 minutes.
So anyway, this, contemporary art bring people to discuss. And this is what I like from contemporary art. That make you think, discuss, make question, try to answer, try to understand. And so this was really interesting. And thank you for this talk and visit together. So we did our first journey and travel in the art exhibition.
That's amazing.
So thank you and see you soon.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Cheers.
Bye. So I end the recording.